Sam Gold is the Executive Director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments. He's the third COG director that we've had on the Municipal Voice, and previously we talked about projects that would move the area forward. Today the feature has taken on a different connotation. Questions now ask when are we going to open up, and how the coronavirus pandemic will shape our towns and cities in the future. We'd like to thank our sponsors at Gateway and Housatonic Community Colleges. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments below. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So our regular viewers know by now what a council of government is, but can you tell us a little bit about the council of government in your area?
Sure. So I am the executive director of the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments.
Mm-hmm.
Also go by the name River COG because
it's a little shorter, yeah.
And we have the Connecticut River at our heart.
Mm-hmm.
We are the result of a merger of two COGs back in 2012.
Okay.
The first merger of COGs in the entire country.
Mm-hmm.
So we pioneered that, and then
have others happened since?
Yes, that led the state with a round of mergers and dissolutions, mm-hmm. and the state went from 15 regional planning organizations down to 9.
Okay.
So we are now down to 9 regions that are larger and
mm-hmm.
a little bit more capable than our predecessors.
So what does the Lower Connecticut River Valley comprise? Like, what are your sort of towns?
So we cover all of Middlesex County, so that's Cromwell all the way down to Old Saybrook, mm-hmm. and then we also include Lyme, Old Lyme, and New London County, which mm-hmm. for some reason, when the county lines were drawn, they decided that Lyme and Old Lyme shouldn't be with the rest of Middlesex County, that they should be with New London. But of course, it was before there were bridges. Mm-hmm. So that is we're in the central part of the coast, mm-hmm. and as I said, our unifying factor is the river, which is. Mm-hmm. Not only the largest river in Connecticut, it's the largest river in
yeah, I think, some of us think of Connecticut, as 95 and 91, but the river valley is historically a much more kind of
exactly
grouping.
And we are a group of 17 municipalities, going from Old Saybrook all the way to the Middletown and Cromwell, mm-hmm. And then along the shoreline from Clinton to Old Lyme.
So in addition to the River COG, you also serve as the chair of the Connecticut Association of Councils of Governments. Can you tell us about that role and how the COGs all work together?
So since the redrawing of COG lines mm-hmm. back in 2014, we created or took the old RPO Directors Organization, renamed it the Connecticut Association of COGs, CT-COG, and we are essentially a group of the COG directors. Mm-hmm. Meet on a monthly basis, and we coordinate across the state. We have 9 COGs who are all very mm-hmm. different and unique, but we're all very much the same as well. Yeah. We all report to each and every first selectman, town manager, mayor of the state. So mm-hmm. every single town and city and borough in Connecticut is in a COG.
Mm-hmm. And in CCM.
And in CCM. So we have that overlap. Mm-hmm. And what this association of COGs does is it provides us a vehicle to coordinate with our partners in the state, whether it be OPM or DOT or DPH. It also allows us to coordinate across state boundaries on projects that are of regional significance, but may affect multiple regions. It also gives us a vehicle to provide to be leaders statewide on various mm-hmm. projects.
So does that council, is there like a corresponding one in New York and Massachusetts that you guys sort of work with?
Yes. So in different states, they do have associations of MPOs. So an MPO is 7 of our 9 COGs are metropolitan planning organizations. Okay. Which is a federal designation. Okay. COG is an MPO, and and the additional MPO responsibility is in regard to transportation planning and mm-hmm. programming for our federal transportation dollars that we get from Washington. Actually just this morning, a number of the COGs were on a call with the MAP Forum. Mm-hmm. And the forum is a partnership of MPOs in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, coordinating for the much larger New York metro area. Mm-hmm. So we coordinate across state lines. Earlier this year, we actually had the deputy director of the Rhode Island MPO come to CTCOG to learn about how we do things in Connecticut. So yeah, we are reaching out across our borders all the time to coordinate on a larger national and regional level, particularly also when there's regulations or a national level that will affect all of us. A few years ago, we all teamed up together to oppose some new regulations that would have merged all of the COG's MPO functions into a giant MPO that would go from Boston to Philadelphia. So we were successful on that. So it's been a useful vehicle for looking out for the interests of our COGs, which really is the interest of our towns, because the COGs are really an extension of the towns.
As the chair, you've been cooperating with both CCM and the Council of Small Towns on webinars that dive into the legal implications of Governor Lamont's executive orders that he's been issuing during this crisis. How did that partnership come about?
Well, it came about because very early on in March, when the president declared a state of emergency and the governor started issuing EOs and declared a state of emergency, everyone was scrambling to find out what to do. What was the legal advice? How does a town enforce an EO? Well, we all realized we were asking the same legal questions, and it just made sense to come together and act as a team, and provide guidance with one voice. As opposed to all the different entities, every single town, every single municipal association, every getting different legal advice. It, first of all, be very expensive. But second of all, we might be giving conflicting advice. So very luckily, RiverCog's attorney happened to also be doing work with CCM, and luckily the legal community in Connecticut is relatively small. They all know each other. So whether whether it be CCM or COST or CTCOGs, we all know each other. So but we're not strangers to working together. And in this situation, it was an obvious fit.
It just made so much sense.
Let's get everyone's lawyers talking to one another. We'll take turns and we'll figure out unified guidance. And we're up to guidance document 4 that should be coming out very shortly about some new executive orders that were released on, I think, on Friday, on May 1st. We also we've held a number of webinars about various issues. Now,
the documents you mentioned, are those something you're sending out to town leaders? Is that something that the public has access to, or is that what are those about?
Yeah, these are public documents interpreting what do the EOs mean, what do the executive orders. So these executive orders started with letter A, and now they're in double letters because there's been so many of them. Yes, they are public documents, and generally they've been sent out to every town via CCM or COST or by their COG directors, and I think they've been posted as well on those websites.
So they're out there so people could find them if they wanted to learn more about this.
Right, and what's interesting about this process with the executive orders is that this is the first time anyone has dealt with a situation like this. And so everyone is learning, but we're all cooperating in a way that will ensure that we're doing the best we can, and that we're minimizing any missteps or mistakes.
And the CCM has been doing a lot to make sure that municipalities are heard during this crisis. Make sure that their voices don't get lost in everything that's going on. I'm sure that the council of governments are doing the same thing. What are some examples of actions that the COGs, yours, or in Connecticut have taken in response to the coronavirus?
Well, very early on in the process, in the pandemic in March, we suddenly had to transition to online meetings, and we transition to working at home. And a number of our towns are not very technologically savvy. They have never held meetings virtually, and they all of a sudden they had the transition to how do you hold a meeting virtually? How do you set a Zoom call? What is Zoom? What are the pros and cons of a Zoom versus Microsoft Teams versus GoToMeeting? Which one's better? Which one's best? And how to set it up, and then how to educate your participants, whether it be your commissioners on your land use commission or members of the public, how to access these new virtual meetings.
Yeah.
And that was something that was very early on that we stepped in to help with. And what's interesting that we've discovered is that people are much more likely to attend a meeting from their house than in a hall. So budget meetings that would have no public attending are now being well attended. And I think this is going to be a positive development for the future for public involvement. There are some drawbacks to virtual meetings. But it does seem like there are more, the attendance is better at meetings, and the public involvement is better.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that some since this has been going on, and I almost wonder if, obviously this is not good, it's a bad situation, but if some of the things that come out of it could actually be good in the future is, has this sort of forced some governments that didn't have the money to invest or just didn't see the need to really update their technology, make their meetings more available to the public, things like that. I think a lot of people right now are trying to figure out how to let people do forms and pay taxes and all sorts of other stuff online that they didn't necessarily make happen before, just because they didn't necessarily have the need or, want to invest money at that point.
And also, I think it's definitely encouraging towns to make the investment in technology.
Yeah.
Also, forcing the state to do the same. So, one big thing that we had been a pet peeve of a lot of the COG directors is the amount of paperwork that we are required to submit with wet ink signatures to various state agencies. And obviously, having to produce that paperwork, having to go into the office to sign that paperwork and then mail it is a concern in these days.
Yeah.
So we've been very successful, and this has been the instant to push many state agencies into helping us help them reduce paperwork,
Streamlining stuff. Yeah.
Another area where the COGs have been helpful is coordinating municipal actions. We have a state that's made up of 169 independent fiefdoms.
Yeah.
And everyone's doing their own thing, but that can be confusing to people. And so my CEOs and CEOs around the state have been using their COGs to coordinate decisions they're making about how to proceed with property taxes. The executive orders gave towns a couple different options for how to proceed, whether they want to defer property taxes for everyone. Do they want to reduce the penalty late interest rate from 18% to 3%? Do they want to do both? And we've used the COG to coordinate those actions and make sure every towns know what each other's doing. Also, issues such as park closures. And
I know we had from Torrington, Mayor Eleanor Carbone was on a couple episodes ago, and she was talking about the problems of kind of unilateral decision making during all this. If one town does close their parks and the next town over doesn't, does everyone just go over to that park and cause a new problem? So I guess you guys are kind of helping to foster the interactions between the towns in this.
Right, and also putting a bug in the ear of the governor's office that maybe there should be some uniform guidance. Although, if you look at what DEEP has done with the state parks, is they have closed individual state parks that were not well suited for social distancing. They've also taken other actions to limit parking and control access to some other state parks to make sure they're not run. But this is going to become an increasingly important issue as the weather warms up. Yeah. And one of River Cog's towns, Old Lyme, is very concerned about getting the message out to people outside of Old Lyme that there may not be capacity at their beaches. So before you get in your car from Hartford and drive down to Old Lyme, they don't want to close the beaches, but they also don't want crowding.
Yeah. So if in past years maybe the kind of capacity was larger, and there's always parking down at such and such beach, this year there might not be because they might only want half the people there or something. And Tim Griswold, the first selectman, is reaching out and trying to get a coordinated policy across the shoreline, so you don't have that situation that Mayor Carbone, where everyone just drives down to the next beach if they can't get on one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And also, most town beaches are much smaller than some of the state beaches, whereas at Hammonasset, the Deep may want to reduce capacity at Hammonasset. They could probably still have Hammonasset accommodate a good number of people.
You can have a lot of people, 6, 10, whatever feet apart, spread out along that big beach. Yeah.
Exactly. Whereas at a lot of the town beaches, there just isn't a lot of space for a lot of people to come. So that's something that that we're trying to foster that coordination. So there is not confusion. Oh, well, this town's beach is open, so that town's beach will be open. Well, no, that's not necessarily the case. We want to make sure that there's a consistent messaging.
So just recently, it was announced that Lieutenant Governor Bicewicz was launching a long-term recovery committee.
Correct.
Which, because eventually we're going to get past the, this initial stage, and we're going to have to figure a lot of things out. I know both the Association of COGs and CCM are a part of this. Can you tell us a bit about the goals of this committee?
Yes. So this is unlike any disaster that we have experienced, that really virtually anyone alive today has experienced.
Yeah.
There might be a few 110-year-olds who might have were around the last pandemic, but this is going to do a great deal of damage to our economies, to people's families, people's livelihood. This is a trauma that we are going to be experiencing in all facets of our lives, and the towns, as much as they're able to, need to do their best to prepare for what does recovery look like? What town resources, and maybe on the regional level, regional resources can we pull together to help our people, help our small businesses, and help our community get back on their feet? Unfortunately, I don't think we it all seems like, it's been a long time that we've been under lockdown.
Yeah.
It has been. Unfortunately, I don't think this is over yet. And there's going to be a lot of casualties in business and unfortunately in friends and family.
Yeah. You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH LP 103.5 FM.
This is going to be more than just Superstorm Sandy, where we get insurance claims and we're rebuilding. People are going to have to rebuild lives after this, and it's going to be. I don't think anyone knows fully knows what that's going to entail, but we are starting to think about that and think about how we're going to work together to support our communities through this.
Yeah. The impact of this is going to be with us a long time after, hopefully the actual disease is gone.
Yeah, and it's also going to be we're going to have to be not only responding to this, but also hopefully be resilient and jumping to something that's more sustainable in the future. Like, what have we learned from this?
Yeah.
I heard in New York State, Governor Cuomo wants hospitals in the future to have 3 months of PPE on hand, inventories. So if we have another pandemic or some sort of swine or some sort of future health crisis, that we will be better prepared next time.
I think a lot of us were caught unprepared for this one, and if this keeps going on, there'll be no excuse in the future not to be prepared.
And there may be some business opportunities here. In the last 2 decades, a lot of the manufacturing for this equipment has moved to China and offshore. So I think there's a great opportunity to bring some of these manufacturers back into the United States, and maybe even Connecticut, so we have a domestic supply. And I think we're going to see lots of different potential changes. This is much bigger. The world changed on 9/11, but this is going to be even bigger than that.
Just the way things operate. If we all are getting so many things delivered, like groceries and things delivered for 6 months, are people going to go back, and when are they going to feel comfortable doing that?
Right.
There's all these different systems that have to go in place, and changing economies.
Yeah, what happens to a commercial office space? What happens to brick and mortar stores? What happens to performing arts? When will people feel comfortable going to a theater?
Going to see a show or a movie or whatever. Yeah.
So all these things, we don't know what the long-term impacts are going to be, but I think it's a good guess that there will be impacts.
Yeah, I know one of our recent guests was our CCM president, Mike Frieda, who's the first selectman of North Haven. And in North Haven, he's got like his Universal Drive sort of commercial area where the big movie theater right now is shut down. And, it's one of those awesome fancy ones with, the lounge seats that kick back and the whole thing. It's great.
Yep, I've been there.
And it's, it's closed right now. And the way he was talking about it, he doesn't know if it's going to reopen, The flip side of that is he also has Amazon there, and Amazon business-wise is, going gangbusters right now. So there's a lot going on. Do you see the impacts of this hitting different towns in your COG differently? Or are some areas and industries better prepared to weather this?
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. So we have towns all along the Connecticut River Valley, which have a strong tourist economy.
Yeah.
And whether you're the Essex Steam Train or the Goodspeed Opera House, or your restaurants in Old Saybrook, or you're the Blue Oar in Haddam, or your Main Street Middletown, those town and city centers are based on whether it be in-state or out-of-state tourism, people coming from somewhere else to go experience the river valley. And as we move into the summer tourist season, that's going to be majorly impacted as people are staying home. So that's going to be a major sector of our economy that's going to be affected. Hotel bookings, of course, are going to be way down. Other areas, obviously the restaurant sector across the country is affected by this as restaurants try to transition to takeout, and we try to find ways of supporting our local restaurants. One example I saw from upstate New York was a bingo card that one city had created with different restaurants in their downtown, and if you filled up card, you would get some sort of prize. I think we need to be more creative, and how we get people to buy local, because one of my concerns is, our local businesses are closed. Amazon is open, but those Amazon shareholders and Amazon profits are not necessarily coming back.
Staying here,
although we do have distribution centers here, those are not. They're not necessarily invested in the community the same way that our small businesses are and small retailers are.
Yeah, you said something about like the program with the bingo and stuff like that. Obviously, you might not have gotten there yet, but do you see something that's going to come up in the long-term recovery committee kind of stuff? Like how, once things are open, how to promote businesses, how to help guide people to how to support people now and businesses now, that sort of thing?
I see there could be a real important marketing and consumer education.
Yeah.
And people are, if you talk to a parent, like I'm not going to risk my family's safety.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be some education to assure people that precautions have been taken. That I think that these ideas of like how to stay safe from diseases are going to be with us. I think people will be wearing masks in the future, we'll look more like some of the Asian megacities where you see people wearing masks regularly, and they're wearing those masks not necessarily to protect themselves, but because they have a cold and they're being considerate of others. They've
been dealing with it longer, and they know if you're in public and you go coughing and sneezing around people and you're not wearing a mask, people are going to not be happy with you.
And I think in the future, if someone is coughing or sneezing and not covering themselves, or even if they're in public, there's going to be a certain social stigma, which will be more severe. And I think maybe rightfully so.
Grandma always told me to cover my mouth when I sneeze, but now someone else's grandma might tell me that on the street.
Right, exactly. And so I think that's going to be one of the other changes. Another sector where I think we have an opportunity is agriculture. Us having a vibrant agricultural sector in Connecticut is more important than ever, as we've seen, to maintain local farms who are literally invested in Connecticut, and be able to support them, so we have local sources of produce and food. that aren't dependent on international or national.
Yeah, you know, we hear about obviously the toilet paper stuff, but also I hear about people going in, there's no fresh vegetables in the store, or frozen vegetables are also out. Having local sources of that kind of stuff that you know are safe, and you know, not producing these mega farms like, you know, the meat packing plants out, but they had the outbreak, you know, hundreds of people in a plant out there affecting our food supply here.
Yeah, and if you can buy meat locally, you don't have to worry about those concerns. You also, there's been shortages of eggs in places. There's our economy is based on a army of truckers that keep on working, and the issues of you know, being a trucker is it's not an easy job these days, because you are going from place to place and potentially getting exposed. So
yeah, and then potentially carrying it to somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah, I know in New Haven, city seed markets, the farmers markets are doing things where you can see what they have ahead of time, and they'll put it together for you, and you pull up and they'll put it right in your car, like curbside sort of stuff. So there's people are thinking, and they're trying to come up with ideas for this, certainly.
And I think, and it's important because all of our farms in Connecticut, virtually all of them are small businesses as well. So they need our support.
What kind of assistance do you see the towns needing from the state and federal government as we start moving forward, looking towards reopening, that sort of thing?
So I think there's going to be a real need for Washington to address the issue of some sort of municipal and state bailout. This is the time that you bring out the credit card, because towns' property tax revenues, the state's income tax and sales tax revenues are going to be massively impacted. At the same time that the town and municipal governments are being asked to do more than they've ever been.
Yeah, they're incurring all these new costs that they didn't have to worry about before.
And so I really think that that we need something on the national level to address this issue, because this is really beyond a lot of the town and the state's wherewithals to be able to provide. But I think going forward, just like the COG is being used to coordinate different for selectmen and mayors' activities, the same thing with our long-term recovery committees. The Lieutenant Governor has rolled out the concept of each town having a long-term recovery team. These would be volunteer teams that would take on the work of figuring out what are the needs in their community and how can we address them within the town. Obviously, you know, we all like to think we're all unique, but there's going to be a lot of commonalities across town boundaries.
Yeah,
there'd be a lot of need for cooperation across town boundaries and coordination. And I think the way that this is different than a lot of other disasters is the social service aspect of it, where we're going to need cooperation with the faith-based communities, with the mental health communities, our workforce investment boards, and many different sort of pieces that, you know, in a natural disaster there might be a piece of it, but this is going to be more comprehensive as we're going to try to help people through this really difficult experience.
Yeah, back to the funding and the feds a little bit. I know CCM, we've, along with the National League of Cities, called on more direct funding for town and cities after the CARES Act, which set a population limit of 500,000 for municipalities to receive direct funding rather than to the state and then down. But in Connecticut, even our three largest cities aren't 500,000. You know, they're 120, 130, something like that, even though, you know, the greater metro areas might hit that. And, you know, because of the history of Connecticut, we have all these smaller geographic kind of places. Like New Haven is only 120 something thousand, but it's also 20 square miles, where Los Angeles is 460 something square miles in physical size.
Correct. Well, so three counties in Connecticut, New Haven, Fairfield, and Hartford counties, are actually getting money as part of the CARES Act. But since there is no county government since 1960, that money is the state of Connecticut. The Connecticut Association of COGs, in cooperation with the State Office of Policy Management, we've been working with the U.S. Census Bureau to get the COGs designated as the county equivalent for for the future, because right now, when there's a federal program that's meant for a county, there's no address.
It doesn't really apply to us. Yeah.
And so other states don't have county government and have had county equivalents. This won't change what the COG is. The COG is still a voluntary association of municipalities. It is not a taxing entity. It's not an entity that makes laws. It's an extension of the towns, but it's the closest thing Connecticut has to. And so we've been working with the Census Bureau to get to have the COGs recognized as the county equivalent for Connecticut. So when there's a natural disaster, we can use the COG getting that money, or in this case for the CARES Act, it would have gone to the COG, which the COG is not really is an extension of the town. So it's really
you're comprised of the elected leaders of those towns. So you're still reflecting the votes of the people, and
Right. So so the COG board is a delegate assembly, like a Senate, and then the first selectman would decide how that. So that's something which I think will be it will be interesting in the future if things were to happen once there is COG county equivalency, which we're shooting for January of next year.
So you're optimistic that'll happen.
Unless COVID delays it. We've been working very closely with the Census Bureau and the state agencies, and I've been working closely with Francis Pickering, the director of the Western Connecticut Council of Governments, and our partners at OPM. And this is something which the census is actually very excited about. Because
just to go off the COVID a little bit for a second there. Are you guys doing anything with the Census Bureau as far as promoting the census and the importance of filling out census stuff?
Well, so very early on last year, the Census Bureau does everything based on the counties because that's what they have, and so the different COGs that covered majority of counties took responsibility for making sure the geographies, whether it be the census blocks, the block groups, or census tracts, made sense because there have been changes over the last 10 years, and we work directly with the Census Bureau to make sure all those geographies were correct.
That's great. They came to you kind of looking for help?
They came to the COGs because there's no one else in Connecticut. And so they are, after going through that process and realizing, well, okay, so if for the lower Connecticut River Valley, that's River COG, that's Middlesex County, but the two towns that are not Middlesex County, that goes to Southeast Connecticut COG. So they were very frustrated by the fact that they didn't have that. And so they actually are very welcoming of this, this formalization of the recognition of COGs in this manner, and it's actually in following Connecticut general statutes. We already can participate in programs and grants as if we were a county for federal purposes. Just the feds had never thought to recognize.
So it's not a crazy idea.
No.
The structure's already there. You just got to get them to sign on the dotted line, sort of thing.
It just means that there's an address to send things to from Washington.
Maybe a big check if we're lucky.
we hope, and we also hope that once the COGs have county equivalency for federal programs, it means, for example, in River COG, we are doing a regional update of our natural hazard mitigation plan. So these are plans that identify what the known natural hazards are in towns, from tornadoes, hurricanes, flooding, snowstorm, and creates a plan of how we can mitigate some of those known impacts. We know that these areas are prone to flooding, so maybe it should be in the town's plan to eventually buy out those homeowners, or maybe we raise we widen a culvert so the water doesn't back up. Well, right now we're doing this project on the behalf of 15 municipalities, but we have to go through a 15 municipality approval process because the COG is not recognized as the county equivalent. And so simple things like preparing for our natural disasters, the bureaucracy we have to go through because we're not legally legally recognized by the federal government. So
a lot of red tape that's been around for a lot of years is going to have to get dealt with now because it has to.
But also on the positive side, for money, it means our towns can come together through the COG and go after competitive grants in a way that they never were able to.
It's just interesting.
Yeah. So And I think that
So
will
they
be
could bring even more money than just the stuff from the
right.
feds. That you could actually bring in grants and yeah.
Well, exactly. It gives us more opportunities to apply,
Mm.
and the more eligible entities there are to apply, potentially the more money will bring into the state eventually. So,
What are the COGs thinking on what reopening would look like? Like, how do you think you kind of step into that? Because not everything's open at once. Like, how do you roll that out? How do you do that?
I think it's a two-step, because it's not only just open. So particularly for business, retail, and services, it's as much as, is it safe to open, and do the
Mhm.
consumers feel safe to patronize those businesses
Yeah.
and services? So it's really a two-parter, and I think when it comes down to it, it's we need more testing and more
Mm.
and unfortunately, we need more science to sort of
Yeah.
guide what we do here. I think some of the other states in the country who are opening up right now, we'll see what they have in store. We unfortunately were impacted earlier and more severely than other parts of the country.
Mm.
So I guess we will see. As for a reopening, there needs to be some return to some sort of normalcy,
Mm.
because people aren't working. The costs of putting everything on hold are great to
Yeah.
particularly small business owners, landlords who have tenants who can't pay rent, and so they can't afford to pay their mortgages or their taxes. If they're not paying their taxes,
The town doesn't have the money, and
it
yeah.
doesn't have any money, and it's just a whole series. So it's we have you have all those things like this is a week where rent is due. So
Mm.
but I think we will have to reopen. How we do it and how quickly it happens is still a big question mark. And I think for a lot of parents, is the issue of, will the schools open in the fall?
Mm.
What will their college students do? Will they be going back
Yeah.
to college, or will they be doing remote classes? There's so many different things
Yeah.
that could affect things. And a lot of it is we are going to figure it out item by item,
Yeah.
because altogether it's just overwhelming. I've heard anecdotally that some colleges and universities are making their decision by the end of June.
Yeah.
But this is going to be a huge impact to these institutions.
Yeah.
Particularly if there's a reduction in revenue from room and board, but also a reduction in the number of students, because I've heard anecdotally that a lot of students don't care for the remote learning, and they're paying a fortune for tuition. So
yeah, we recently talked to the head of the Yale student body, the president of that, and he says, it's not the same. It's not like being at Yale doing it from home. And just the reason that pops in my mind is I do live in New Haven, and obviously businesses are shut down right now, but in downtown New Haven, one of the biggest businesses, as it were, is Yale University. The students eat at those restaurants on Chapel Street. They do that. So if they're closed, just as a municipality, that's 5,000-10,000 students, and then there's Southern that might not be around and contributing to the economy in the fall. So that's a concern, obviously, for some towns in the state.
And that is a concern in every town and city that has a college or university. So Middletown is in the same boat. The Wesleyan bookstore is right on Main Street. We have the students frequenting and spending money in the city of Middletown, and if those students are not coming back in the fall, what does that mean for those businesses? It's going to mean even if they're open, they may not be viable anymore. So there's a lot that we will be dealing with moving forward. I think that I think as testing is rolled out, whether it be antibody testing that hopefully will, if you have antibodies, you have some sort of immunity, will help people to sort of go out and go about their business with less fear. I heard a friend of mine in New London said that he's going to be getting an antibody test at the local Quest lab. So it's happening. It's happening through the private laboratories. We don't know what antibodies mean, if it means you're immune, but if we can move to a system where we can get testing for large numbers of people, we can assess, what our real risks are.
Yeah. So I would say safe to say when you started this job that you didn't think that pandemics would be changing everything for you.
No.
And when we were doing research for the show, we found an article from 2015 where it said that you had volumes on plans to mitigate natural hazards for roads and transit corridor improvements and for emergency preparedness. How has your job changed in the last few months? How have your plans changed, timelines for some of that other stuff?
So you are correct. The COGs are generally been responsible for these natural hazard mitigations. So we're planning for the natural disasters, which we know will come, like the next hurricane, which we hope doesn't come this year. But you never know. We also River COG and a number of the other COGs are the fiduciaries for their emergency planning regions. So the Division of Emergency Management and Homeland Security, we host that division. So for River COG, it is the New Haven area, New Haven County, and Middlesex County, and the lower part of Middlesex County. There's 5 emergency planning regions in the state. To be quite honest, pandemic was not in our plans. We were actually as recently as January very concerned dealing with the issue of invasive species killing our forests. So the plague of
the emerald ash borer was the biggest plague you were worried about. Yeah,
right. We of these insects coming from other parts of the world and killing our trees. We never expected that we would have something that was killing our residents. Yeah. One thing that River COG is working on right now, and it's been continuing during the pandemic, is our regional plan of conservation and development, which is a vision document to sort of guide development and conservation of the region. And what's become very clear in this process is that we don't know what the impacts are going to be of this, but we have some ideas of what they could be. And so we are going to be including a chapter on COVID. It may not be a very long one because it may be a lot of speculation and conjecture, but some of the things to think about, these plans are meant for our 10-year document. And over the course of this, of the life of this regional plan of conservation development, the effects of COVID are going to have major impacts to our land use. We may see people leaving places like New York City and needing to come to more rural areas of Connecticut.
Yeah,
we may, with improved information technology, people may make that choice. We also realizing how much we knew this already, but how high-speed internet is a essential public service.
Yeah,
public utility, just like light and telephone were in the 1930s.
Especially now with all the kids doing remote learning from home, they have to have that access. Yeah.
And I would be surprised if that isn't somehow addressed, like it was in the 1930s with you provide high-speed internet to almost every address in the country, so you could do at-home learning in the case of a situation like this, and setting minimum service standards for that, just like we have for other public utilities.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things that could be in there. They will develop over the course of our project. We're going to all of our towns, consulting with them. It's going to be interesting about how you do public involvement when the public can't come together. It's new territory for all of us.
How do you come together while staying socially distant? Yeah,
exactly. And since people can attend in their pajamas or in my case shorts, you get better turnout. But is it a representative turnout? That's the question. You're getting people who are technically savvy enough to join a Zoom meeting. have a computer, who have internet access. But
the social distinctions, can people afford things? Yeah.
Right, but if you have, it may not be accessible to everyone that may have physical disabilities or intellectual disabilities. So it's or if you're just not technically savvy. So that's
I haven't even thought of that. If meetings are all done, public meetings are done on Zoom, does Zoom then have to be ADA compliant or whatever?
Yes, there's guidance on that, and a number of these services do provide transcription. So, and that transcription can be read by a reader, but how good is that transcription? And or furthermore, it makes an assumption that you have access to high-speed internet, which is for some people that's just may not be in their budget, or we're doing a transit plan right now, and we have a large transit-dependent population that has developmental disabilities, and they may not have. They may be able to come to a meeting and give testimony, but may struggle to be able to attend a Zoom meeting. So we're really struggling right now to figure out how do we do public involvement on service improvements and changes when our transit-dependent population may struggle to be able to access the information. This will be new territory for.
It doesn't sound like the COGs or CCM are going to run out of questions that need answering anytime soon.
Unfortunately not.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
So thanks to Sam Gold from the River COG. Thanks for our sponsors at Gateway Community College and Housatonic Community College. Learn more at gatewayct.edu and housatonic.edu. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer. Christopher Gilson is our producer. Harry Draws is on the boards. And I'm Matt Ford, your host.